Hey, everybody, welcome to the follow-up session of the three-part AI series we did with John Munsell from Bizzuka on everybody's telling you to use AI, but nobody's showing you how to use AI. John Munsell is the founder of Bizzuka, a leading authority on helping organizations adopt and scale AI. He spent over 8,000 hours hands-on, more now, by the way. It's been a couple more weeks.
It's been 1,000 hours ago.
Okay, a thousand
No.
hours, right? Exactly. So he spent over 9,000 hours with hands-on tools like ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, and Perplexity. So he knows what works and what doesn't. John has developed influential frameworks such as the AI strategy canvas, scalable prompt engineering, and the ingrain AI roadmap. These tools are designed to help organizations and people implement AI consistently, securely, and at scale. John is also the author of Ingrain AI Strategy Through Execution, and his methods are now taught at LSU and used by professionals in business, government, and education. And that book was very popular in our webinars and in the chat. One of the main reasons everybody wanted that book is because the Ingrain AI roadmap is in there, and it is literally a map on how to formulate your conversations that you're going to have with AI. So the three sessions that we did were called Which AI Tool Should I Use? Get Better Results from AI Prompts, and Using GPTs for Business. And during the three sessions, I collected all the questions that we had. I added a few from me, and then we're now going to answer all the questions for everybody. And John, some of them are remedial, some of them are advanced, but we want to cover all of them. To start off with probably, the simplest question, but the most important question, what is a prompt?
Well, good question. So think about it in just the strictest terms of the word prompt. When you're prompting something, you're giving it some information about something you want it to do, right? So when we're prompting AI, you have to think about the different types of AI. So on your phone, you've got Siri, or you've got an Echo with Alexis in there, Alexa. That's AI, and you're asking it questions and it's giving you a response. In large language models, which are the generative AI tools that we all are using, like ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, Gemini, Grok, right? All of those, they basically operate like chat windows. So in order for them to do anything, you have to type something in that chat window and then it responds. Underneath it is this large language model that's been trained on the world's content. And so it's engineered to kind of mimic human intelligence and reasoning, and it generates from essentially from learned patterns. Okay. So you could tie in all sorts of software applications through what we would call the back end or the playground, or using an API connection. But the vast majority of people just use it from this chat interface. So a prompt is literally just typing something in that chat interface. The tricky part is AI tries to understand what you're asking and how you word that. AI is going to make a lot of inferences, and you have to know what to give it up front so that it's not making all these inferences and then literally making things up. So the way you structure a prompt is critical. And because they operate on what's called NLP, or natural language processing, meaning you should be able to just type in and go back and forth and back and forth. Well, the way you structure a sentence may be comfortable in whatever dialect or language or area of the world you're from. AI's got to try to decipher that, and that's where you can get into trouble. But the more you know about prompting, the better your results will be.
It's a interesting example to echo what you're saying. I was at an event and Amazon was there and they were talking about, I can't say because it's next to me, but Alexa, and how um, they can't just assume that when people are looking for something, they call it a hamburger. What if they call it a burger? What if they call it a meatloaf?
Right.
So they have to train it to recognize all the forms that people might
Mhm.
say, then accents, people with disabilities who might speak differently, or anything like that. So I mean, even like going to the dentist and having Novocaine in your mouth, and you're
Right.
speaking, differently. What are the best types of tasks to try first with GPT if you've never done anything, and which platform would you recommend?
Okay, so there's Chat GPT, which some people just say chat. Okay, some people just say GPT. I call it Chat GPT because I just that way everybody knows what I'm talking about. And then you've got, like I said earlier, Gemini, Perplexity, Claude, Grok. Those are the main ones that are publicly available through the web. So uh, we already covered in one of those which one's the best to use and when. And as early as this morning, I was running into some other experiments and found some shocking stuff. I uploaded a spreadsheet with 800 transactions in it. And they were literally transactions that came straight out of QuickBooks. Okay, Quick In to be exact. And I wanted it to determine what the recurring bills were, right? Because I got a lot of these things. So I said, hey, go through this and tell me which ones are recurring. And I could have built a pivot table. I could have done a number of things. And I could have tried to figure it out on my own. But I thought, let's just see how AI does. I put it into all of those tools with the exception of Perplexity, but I put it into all those tools. And ChatGPT took the longest. And by the way, I took it and I put it into their most recent, most powerful model just to see how it would do. And there should be about 150 of them in that 800, or about 120 at a low end. It came up with six.
Oh,
So it was a little. I'm sorry, no, no, no. That was Gemini. Gemini came up with six. Um, and it did it in about 12 seconds. So it was way off. And several of them, out of the six, two of them were mentioned twice. So it was a joke. ChatGPT took the longest, like I said, and it came up with like 100 or so, but it did all sorts of stuff that I didn't ask for, like mean time before next charge and all this really crazy stuff. It was interesting, but it wasn't accurate. Then Claude literally bombed twice. It went through this whole iteration and finally just wiped out everything that was on the screen and just went back to the cursor to start all over again. And I wasn't on the screen when it blew up. And so I like, shoot, let me try it again. And then it blew up again. And so then I did a couple of other configurations by changing it from an Excel spreadsheet into a CSV file and had it try it again.
okay, but John, that sounds awfully complicated. And
It's complicated. Yeah,
I
it's
mean,
not
so
for
what are
your
you saying?
average
Don't
bear.
don't load QuickBooks into ChatGPT?
Well,
Like
no, it
what
wasn't
is
QuickBooks, right? It was just an Excel spreadsheet. So my
okay?
my point being that Claude, in its most advanced model, literally made up 80% of the entries in there, which was shocking to me. I mean, a lot of those charges weren't even in the original spreadsheet, and it just made stuff up. That's called hallucination. Um, Grok nailed it, which was surprising to me. It was fast too. It did it in 8 seconds. It figured it all out. I'm like, that's interesting. So what am I saying? I'm saying, okay, don't go dumping in spreadsheets right now and think it's going to do beautiful analytical work. You're going to need to know how to work it to get it to do that, and that's a different beast right now. The easiest things I can think of are the ones that everybody's probably already doing: writing emails, writing blog posts, summarizing meetings, maybe getting a little more off color. You could draft job descriptions or interview questions. You could brainstorm product names or campaign ideas. I use it as a thought partner. So I've created what are called custom GPTs. They're basically, let's just call them little segments of either Chat GPT or Claude or Gemini. Gemini calls theirs a gem and Claude calls theirs a project. And you can even create a project in Chat GPT. But you upload detailed documents about your company or your products or whatever. And then you can just work inside of that project and brainstorm stuff. Like I built one that has our business plan in it and all our products and pricing and stuff. And I was like, hey, um, and this is the cool stuff. If it, when we talk about the basic first stuff, research is going to be the first one. All right. But the tricky part is making sure it doesn't hallucinate. I love to turn on the deep research. All of them have now deep research, but I love Perplexities. It does a really fine job, and so does ChatGPT's, and frankly, so does Gemini's. But what I like to do is have it do market research for me and then come back and use that as a knowledge base document or use that market research to then go into a project where it has all of my pricing and strategies and say, hey, how do I compare to the market? Right. So that's, another step up. But those are some of the easy ones. Some people will just say,
You
go take
did,
a picture of the fridge, and
yeah.
tell me what's in there. Right.
Well, to tell you the truth, I did that the other day. I
Yeah.
have a library of 750 podcasts in my Dropbox. And first I asked it, can you see, here's a link to my Dropbox. Can you see in there? And it was like, nope, I can't see in there. But if you put everything in the Dropbox in me, I can help you. And I'm like, that's not going to happen.
Right.
It's too much and it's not going to work.
Mhm.
So I took a screenshot of just what was on my screen and I put it in there and I said, can you read that? The next thing I knew, I had an Excel file with everything listed out, which is
Yeah.
what I was trying to get. So it was really miraculous. It can read screenshots. So
Oh, yeah.
here's the question I have for you, which is that you're an expert at this, and even you didn't get the result that you wanted when you asked those engines to help you with a task.
Hmm.
And you definitely went over this in the webinar, and I strongly recommend that everybody watch the webinars because they're full of practical information that can help you start all of this today. So why does the way that you ask a question matter so much? And what are you supposed to do if you don't get an answer that makes sense or it's not what you were looking for?
Okay, so take it at what we're doing right now. You and I are having a conversation. We see each other, we see our facial expressions, we see our body language, we see everything else. We can instantly respond, but we understand, probably what you're talking about. Now, if I were having a conversation with my lovely and talented bride, we'd be talking about a certain individual. And then the next thing you know, she goes, and you know what I forgot how she'll switch gears, but she'll go, she did this yesterday. And I'm like, well, who's she, because we were talking about this over here, right? So she just jumped tracks on me in the middle of a conversation. I'm like, I'm trying to figure who the characters are now. All
Yeah.
right. Now, my kids, though, so they grew up typing with two thumbs, and you and I grew up trying to figure out how to type with 10 fingers. So my daughter can type faster with two thumbs than I can with, 20 fingers. But they're always complaining to me that I'm too brief in my text message response, or I don't put enough emojis in there so they can't really think what I'm thinking. And I'm like, I just don't have time for all that stuff. Um, but you've probably had an email correspondence when somebody asked you something and there's missing context, and you're like, I don't know how to follow through with this request. So you have to go, I'm sorry, what exactly are you saying here? Right. So none of these AI tools can respond unless they have the appropriate context. They're not mind readers. they have a ton of information, but if you don't give them specific context about what you're trying to accomplish, then it's going to go up and try to make stuff up because you just ask it to fulfill a request, because essentially it's like a robot, right? You say, do this, its mission is to do that. And absent information, it will just go try to do stuff and it will make stuff up. On the other end, if you give it the instructions and say, I want you to do X for me, and if you need anything from me, ask before you start making it up. Well, then it'll start asking you questions. You're like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to need to know X, Y, and Z, right? So on the other end of it, it's going to have what we call prompt conflict because AI is designed to infer a lot from the words you use. So if I were to say, write me a blog post about direct mail advertising in 2025. Okay. So what have I given it? I've given it a task, but I haven't given it what my thoughts are. I haven't told it anything about a specific market like Texas or Austin or something like that. I haven't told it whether we're trying to target um, mortgage companies or realtors or pediatric clinics, right? All of that context is missing. And I haven't really told it how I want it to write. So it's going to make that up. If I say, I want you to write a research paper on topic X, it's going to write in a very formal way because of the words research paper. It's making that leap that, oh, this better be a formal document. If I say, I want you to write a Facebook post, it's going to make a leap into how that writes. So if you don't tell it how you want it to write, it's going to look at the words and the request and it's going to make inferences. So the words that you use matter. And
Right.
that's key.
And you taught me this. It's also letting it know the perspective. Who's asking and like for what? I'm asking about advertising, but am I a designer and I'm looking for new ideas? Am I a company and I want to spend some money on advertising? Am I a printer who wants to sell advertising to people in Texas? So that matters too, doesn't it?
There are a couple of things that matter. One is who is your target audience? And two is what is the role you want the AI to play, right? Who you are as an individual is another context box. If, for instance, you're writing an email reply to somebody and it wants to know and fill in the blanks and all that fun stuff. But if you're trying to hire an assistant and you're trying to get it to act as you, then yeah, you better have some part of your prompt that describes you and your expertise and your background because you want it to essentially execute like that, right?
I have now just become, in this very moment, fascinated by writing a having the AI write job descriptions so you could say to it, write this description to attract college students to be interested in the printing industry or
Yeah,
to take up design classes or something like that, which humans don't really do because they always make it like, this is the job, these are your tasks,
right,
this is your salary, and you will die in that cube, at some
right,
point in
right.
time. And there's a big opportunity there. So I'm gonna steal that for you.
Well, I tell you what, that's one of the prime examples I give of a scalable prompt.
I love it.
A job description, telling it to write a job description, let's just say that's the request, right? Write a job description. All right. The target audience and the role it plays, you could swap those out, right? So the role it plays would be a professional job description writer. The target audience could be like you just described. You're trying to hire somebody to write to operate a printing press. If you're that person, A job that a job description that just repeats what I already do tells me that's a job I already have. On the other hand, if the job description speaks about the place I want to work and the job I want to have, the job that is different from the one I've got, now you've got my interest.
Right.
So you have to have context about who that individual is, what's driving that person, what makes them frustrated in their current job, what makes them really want to work here, what's your business like.
Right.
Those are context blocks, right? What is my business like? Why is it a great place to work? And then what's this person's pain points, frustrations, and expertise levels? Okay. Now I have a job description that's got a marketing bend to it that I could go post on our website or on Indeed or whatever. And it's going to read to that person like, dang, I want to go work there.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
On the other end, if I swap out those blocks, I swap out the target audience and I swap out the role and I say, you're an HR specialist who specializes in writing OSHA compliant job descriptions for our employee handbook, and the audience is an OSHA inspector or something like that. Guess what? The request is the same thing, right? The request still is write a job description. The execution is entirely different because you're just literally swapping out those two things. Does that
Right.
make sense? But you can
It,
keep the
yeah.
company stuff in there. All the
Right.
company stuff is still going to make sense,
Right.
but you're just
Yeah.
swapping out two variables.
It totally makes sense. I call those templates. I know you don't like when I call them templates, but it's just easier to
We call them
understand.
prompts, but that's okay.
Prompts and you call it a
Yeah,
roadmap because you
yeah.
really
It's
do
still a
you
template. Yeah, it's a
yeah,
templatized
I
prompt.
mean, people in my world understand templates and that they
Yeah,
understand that some information stays and other information can be switched out and
yeah,
it's still going to be the same information about the company and
mhm,
everything, but who it's going to and the purpose of it can change. So I think it's a
yeah,
great just a great word to tie it together on a human level.
yeah. Totally makes sense.
Okay, so how do people start using AI for their everyday work tasks?
Wow. That's a great question. So the first thing I would do is I would pick one daily task that you'd really like to streamline. Something that drives you nuts because it's repetitive and you know that AI could generate this faster if you gave it enough information, right? That would be the first thing. And then I would turn that task into a simple prompt. I'd run it, I'd refine it, and then I would save it when I got it to do it the right way. And then when you're really good, this is what the book Ingrain is all about. You'd share it with others in your office and then ask for theirs, and you could learn from each other's structure, right? And that would
Right,
be the main thing, because everybody who goes through our training, by the way, they build what we call a capstone project, which is some sort of a custom GPT or Gemini Gem or Claude project that shaves 3 hours off of their work week, right? So they're going to sit there and do this very thing. They're going to go, how can I use AI in my everyday tasks? But in a perfect world, it would be something I create once and I could use over and over and over and over again, right?
right.
That
Yeah,
is the foundation of creating a scalable prompt and having your entire team know how to do it and share their successes with others. And now it gets to be a little infectious and run throughout the
right.
organization.
And I'm sure that um, emails are repetitive emails. I know I do them
Mhm.
all the time with
Yeah.
instructions about, proofing podcasts and things like that.
Mhm.
So I just have it in Word and I copy and paste it and change the person I'm talking to and the file that they need to look at. But it got to a point where, like, why am I typing this 100 times a day? The other thing is that, if I get a ton of these emails and then soliciting, like, we have a great story for you to run, and it tells me something. And then I start getting just following up on this. And then sometimes
Right.
I get, hi, I'm that person's supervisor, and I'm just following up to make sure you're not going to miss out on this great interview opportunity.
Mhm.
And I would say that you can create such personal, accurate, motivational communications that would take you right out of that. As soon as I see the I know it exactly what is
Right.
happening. Sometimes the first email is a because they want you to click it and open it up. And by the way, no one's clicking links on those things, hopefully. So if you need
Right.
your links clicked and you need your emails responded to, you can ask the GPTs to give you those machine responses, but with everything you know about the client, with something a new something that you have new that you know would be interesting to them, and then
Yeah.
you can just keep, like you said, keep that information about that product, and then have it adjust it for each person you're sending, because you've trained it to know who they are, and that's what we're up to right now. So
Yeah.
what's the difference between training GPT and just giving it a background info for a task? Like, I'm going to send one email. I want to get John to do something with me. So here's John's website. Here's the some excerpt from his book. Tailor this pitch to what would be interesting to him.
Okay. So first, let's get our terminology straight. Whoever asked the question used the phrase GPT, and I'm sure that person must have meant what a large language model, because LLMs are the class that ChatGPT and all of them are, right? They're large language models that allow you to have a chat interface. Those LLMs are trained up, so you can actually create one and have it internal and train that entire model by giving it massive amounts of data. That takes a lot of time, money, and energy, quite literally, right? So most of us don't have that unless you're a multi-billion-dollar company and you need an LLM on premises and you want to train it up just about your industry and your specific use cases. So different beast altogether. On the other end, what we typically do is we're giving it information and background information. And because of those things that I've been talking about, the custom GPTs inside of ChatGPT and the Claude projects and the Gemini gems, those are like miniature LLMs, let's just call them. They're just custom areas that have your own information in there. And all you have to do is upload that documentation once, and you can constantly query that information or have it look at that information to give you better responses. And you can change your prompt too. So just because you have it all that information in a custom GPT doesn't mean that it's not going to go out on the web and look for other information, but it can temper the response. So, like you were talking about replying to emails and having them be customized, right? The cool thing is when you get good at making custom GPTs, you could literally build one for your customers, you know? And so now when you reply back to somebody, it's got all kinds of information about that customer inside the GPT. Or you could have your GPT have everything about your company, but you have what we would call a prompt stack or a prompt container about your customer. So every email is going to know who that person is. That becomes your target persona, know all about your stuff, and then it'll write something that's really cohesive and customized. And I'll give you a big example of that. When we work with clients, we always do it over Zoom because all of our clients are all over the world, and we're recording those using AI note takers. And those AI note takers give us a transcript. So we'll take that transcript, we'll analyze the transcript, and over time, we have a history of conversations with our clients or our prospects. That history I can put into a GPT and have it create a persona profile for that individual. So instead of me now writing to a generic persona like we were describing earlier for the job description, I'm now writing to a unique individual, right? So it might say, oh, this person really likes numbers. This person's grandmother died last week. This person, blah, blah, blah. You could have all kind of information. And so now when the email comes in, then it'll draw on that information and temper the feedback, right? It might say this person likes really short, sweet replies. This person doesn't like lengthy stuff, or this person likes really detailed descriptions. So now all of a sudden, your chat GPT, custom GPT knows a whole lot about who it's writing to. I mean, that's how we write our proposals. Not only that, but when we create a proposal, we have the AI emulate that persona that we created on our target person, and we have it read our own proposal and come up with objections. And then we rewrite the proposal to meet the objections, right? And so we go back and forth with that until we have a really fine-tuned, customized proposal that will speak directly to that individual in the way that individual likes to be spoken to.
It makes total sense. And just to reiterate, all that customer information, you out there have to give to the LLM to learn it. So
Yes.
if somebody's grandmother passed away last week, and you have to know that information and put it in there, otherwise it's not going to know.
Right.
Correct, right? It's
Mhm.
unless it, like you said, goes out and it's like, oh, there's an obituary that matches this family's name. Although it seems like it's a
Yeah.
weird example, but it's actually a
Yeah.
good example because it could be very inappropriate to contact somebody if you're not aware of their
Right.
of their personal situation, and if you are, you know, there could be some guidance there. So is there a way to keep AI from forgetting what I told it? And I'm saying it in the first person, but it was someone
Mhm.
else's question.
I'm sure what that person was referring to, that there's, boy, this is a complicated answer because there's several aspects to the memory, if you will. Inside of ChatGPT, there's a little switch on where you can have it turn on its memory and it'll start to remember all the conversations that you've had with it, and it'll start to save all that. Now, you can go in and delete it or delete portions of it, but it will memorize things. And then it'll start to understand how you typically reply. Theoretically, it makes it easier. The problem I always had with it is that we work with so many customers and we have so many different ways we communicate. That memory thing messed up my responses. And so I just turned it off. Okay. On the other end, if you're in one window, what they call it a context window, you start one chat session with ChatGPT. That context window only can hold so much information. I it's they're called tokens at the base level, but essentially it's memory, right? It's how much can it hold in its memory before it says, okay, I got to throw some stuff out. What is interesting is how the different models handle this and how much they have. So the one with the biggest context window is going to be Gemini. You can put all kind of stuff in there and it'll go on and on until your scroll bar is that big, right? If you were going to do that in ChatGPT, your scroll bar could get that big, but all the stuff way up here that is, way beyond the early stuff, it's going to forget it because it's like, I'm just going to focus on what I got. And when you see it forgetting, that you're going to have to go back and say, hey, remember all this stuff. Well, it'll go back and it'll pull that back in, but it's going to have to throw something back out to do it. So Claude has an interesting way of doing it. It finally taps out. I don't know whether you've had it happen to you before, but
Not on
I
Claude, on GPT, Chat
yeah.
GPT, it has, yeah.
Well, I've had it on ChatGPT. I've had it forget stuff, but on Claude, it literally says this conversation is over.
Oh,
Yeah, right.
rude.
It just yeah. Well, it doesn't quite say it that way, but that's essentially what it says.
It's
It
like,
says
John,
sorry.
no, go
Yeah,
away,
yeah,
John.
right. Yeah,
You're annoying us
yeah.
today.
It says you've reached the limit on this conversation. Start another one. And I'm
Wow.
like, oh, okay. So then you have to go figure out, okay, well, what of this conversation is important for me to carry over? And how do I do that? And that means you have to cut and paste into a document and then shove that document into a new thing and start all over again. But that's kind of the reason that you would use custom GPTs or Claude projects. But you also have to remember that, especially in a Claude project, the data in the project, right? If you've uploaded a bunch of documents in there about your company, whatever, that counts against that memory, right? So that means that you can only have so many back and forths because you got a lot of information in there. I have the cool thing is it gives you a little bar chart and says what percentage of that memory you've taken up by uploading these documents. And I've run them at 90% before. You ask it a couple of questions and it eventually goes, I'm done, move
Right.
on. So you have to figure out, okay, do I really need this document? Sometimes it's because you have PDF documents in there that suck up a lot of space they don't need to. What I've gotten in the habit of doing is trying to convert as many of those to just raw text files because they
Mm,
process a lot better. They don't have all the superfluous information and that like a PDF or a Word document would. So
yeah.
those are some of the tricks.
I the other day I was working on doing a redoing a proposal that I had. So I put
Mhm.
the proposal in there and I said, you know, help me find other opportunities that would have value to sponsors and things like that. And I told them some of the sponsors. And it was a great conversation. A couple days later, I was like, okay, I'm ready to write my proposal. I went back in there. The container of the chat was there, but the information, the great information that we had come up with was not. And I was like, I started asking it, like, find it for me. Like, where is it in
Yeah.
here? And it gave me the timestamp of our conversation, but it literally told me because I didn't save it, it's gone now, which was eye opening for me. I didn't
Yeah.
realize it, so I was like, okay, no problem. I know to do that next time,
Mhm.
and we redid it, and everything was fine. How do you keep track of all the good prompts that you create, and how do you label or tag chats so you can search and find them later?
Yeah, great question. I could share my screen if you want, but we use Notion and we've created a prompt database in Notion and we give a copy of this to the people that go through our training. And actually, in the book, if you go into the book, you'll see how we do this. And in the book, it points to a URL where you could join our community and you'll get a copy of this for free. Not the entire database, but you'll get a database for free. But let me see if I can share this real quick just to show you what it looks like. All right, you can see that. All right, right?
Yes,
Okay, so this is our prompt database, and you can see we've got
that's
uh,
insane, John.
318 of them in there, but it's a ton. And we even have a workflow in it so that we have ones that we're working on, ones that we're testing that we've developed and approved and published and ready for distribution if we're going to send them out to the people in our community. Um, but what we have in here, you see all these different fields, right? This is the actual prompt. If I were to go into one of these things, let's say here, this is one of the prompts that I actually have in the book. All right. So this is using AI as a thought partner. Right. So I have what stage it's in. I'm going to go ahead and that's already published. This would, if we had different tools, we could tell it, okay, this is specifically designed for a specific tool. Most of the time it's good for all of them. Right. And then over here, I would say whether or not it's a client specific prompt or whether it's just a stack, which is a container inside of a prompt, or what piece of the prompt it might be. But anyway, that's what it would look like. But then sometimes you have follow-up prompts. So like you have an entire prompt chain that you go through to run a process. So we would have areas for those in there, and then we would have an area to describe the purpose. This is always good to have the date that it was created and the date that it was updated. So you can go and look and make sure that was the most current version of it. There's a whole lot of other stuff that we can do in here. But having a database like this allows you to be able to search and find one. So I can go over here and if I'm looking for a persona or if I'm looking for a generator, right? So I got all these different generators. So anyway, that's why we like a database. Now, when I'm building one, I'm going to go into like a Google Doc and just start typing it in there and then pasting it into a GPT so that I have it and I can edit it. And then, it's just easier to see on a big sheet than it is inside the little context window they allow you to play with.
Mhm.
So I'll build it out in there and then I'll start working it, if that makes sense.
Here is the last question for you.
Hmm.
Google is making serious changes over at Google, realizing that as their share of searches are going down and their advertising is going down, because people are searching in AI. And we all know, if you're on Google and if you ask it certain questions, it will give you an AI answer from Gemini. I'm pretty sure, yeah, uh, in the search engine
Yeah.
results.
Mhm.
How can we best prepare for that situation?
All right, there's a lot to unpack in that question, right? So most people have been using Google or Bing or some other search engine for a long time, and what you're typically doing is using a few words because it was using its own algorithm to fine tune what it gave you, and if you typed in the wrong stuff, you'd have to type in something new. The way you use an AI tool like a ChatGPT is different. You're looking to solve a problem. Typically, you're looking for information and you're having a big conversation. So there's been, a lot of movement to where search is now being primarily is wrong. It's way off. Let's just say it's gradually moving towards AI and away from Google, but Google still dominates the world in that space. The thing is how do you strategically build your website to appear in both places? So content marketing has always been about producing more content that Google could consume and you could potentially be found, right? All right. AI has made that problem get ridiculously worse, right? So I forgot how many billions of pages are getting produced per day now with AI. It's absolutely insane. So that means that you have to be really strategic about what you put on your website. First of all, you should have always kept your website up to date with, locations and phone numbers and hours of operation and anything that's really, potentially going to be changing. So it should always be current. But now the question is, what do you write about in your blog posts that could potentially be found by ChatGPT or by Perplexity? And what we teach people to do is look at the buyer's journey, and you're familiar with the buyer's journey, right?
Yes.
Okay, so what I want to know is how close to the bottom of the funnel are they? In other words, how close to the decision making point are they? Um, and I want to write content around that. And then I want to look at the other stages of the buyer's journey and I want to write content around that. But what I'm trying to do is make that content about answering the questions that they're asking of themselves or others at those unique stages. And most of the time, it's going to start with a symptom. If we're talking about one end of the buyer's journey, it's going to start with a symptom or something they've observed, and they're
Just for
trying to figure
example,
out what
I
it
need
is.
more people to attend my event.
Now, that's closer to the bottom of the
Okay,
funnel.
sorry.
The top part of it is my revenue is down. What can I do to increase my revenue? And then somebody might say, oh, I think I'm going to have some more events. Okay. Then it's going to be, what kind of event should I put on for my company to drive more people? And then it could be other stuff, right? So, but what you're the path that you're walking down is the path to solve your problem, right? And when you ask what was it you asked about? What kind of event can I put on, or how
How
can I
do I
get
get
more
more people
people
to
to
come to
attend
my
my
event? Yeah.
events? So the flip side of that is not asking it, how do you get more people to your event, but to ask it, what questions are people asking who are seeking an event, right? Why are they seeking an event? And then write about that. You know what I mean? Because that's what I want to know. Is it's um, if you just ask a GPT, how do I get more people? They'll go write more content. Blah blah blah. On the other end, if you've done a really detailed analysis of your persona by understanding the pains and frustrations and problems that they have that you can solve, now, when you ask ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, hey, what are people, my persona, what are they asking at this stage of the buyer's journey? What are they asking about? Like, for instance, in our world, people are asking how much does it cost to train my employees on AI? And you know, we wrote a bunch of blog posts about that. And I noticed that we were getting a whole lot of traffic, and we couldn't see that that traffic was coming from Google. And so we started to re-engineer our tags to see where it's coming from. And turns out it's coming from Perplexity and ChatGPT, and Claude, which is fascinating to me. But it's because we spent a lot of time doing that analysis and analyzing our ideal customers' journey and understanding what was going on in their heads as they went through that journey, and how we could grab and make the and answer those questions they were asking at that stage. Does that make sense? So that's
Yes.
the kind of stuff that you want to be asking or writing about.
The Notion document that you showed us, is that
Mhm.
something you do for companies too? Go in
Yeah.
there and build the prompts for them?
And that's the thing, right? Because there's so many courses that I've seen. Like, oh boy, just this morning I was, mindlessly wandering through Facebook, and there was this ad that came up about 10,000 marketing prompts or business prompts or something like that for, I think they wanted $47 because it was 70% off. I'm like, you can ask ChatGPT for those prompts. How do you think they came up with 10,000 prompts?
Right.
They just asked ChatGPT to create them, so you can do that for free. And if you have time to read 10,000 prompts, you got bigger problems, right?
Yes.
but but the reality is that they teach you one-liner prompts or really basic prompts that really are nothing more than a way to get a really long context window in place, because you don't know how to structure it. So you have to go back and forth to get anything meaningful. What the prompts that they sell you do are make a novice go, wow, look at what it gave me on this simple sentence. Eventually that parlor trick kind of wears thin, and you realize, nah, it's not any good. It's not giving me what I need. And so a lot of people just go, this AI thing, it ain't all that great.
Right. Or
That's
it's too
because they
complicated. Right.
Yeah, but that's because they don't know how to do it. And so what our mission is, and this is also why I wrote the book. I wrote the book to tell people how, right? I didn't want to be another book that just says, you got to do this. The world's about to collapse. And if you don't learn AI, you're going to
Right.
collapse with it. No, I mean, you got to learn. Now it's not a bedtime story kind of a book,
Hmm.
right? It's a
Right.
it's a kind of a complicated read, but if you're not trying to embed AI across your organization, you can skip the first few chapters or the first few sections. You can go right into the scalable prompt engineering part of it. I would probably start with the first section, and then I would go to the fourth section, which I believe is the scalable prompt engineering section. So you can skip around. That's what it's meant to do. But if you go through our training, what we teach you how to do is build these persona stacks and persona documents, and just knowledge-based documents. In fact, yesterday morning, we had our mastermind session, and I walked through this process of creating a business intelligence document and then turning around and using it as a knowledge-based document. And one of the guys in there is like, "Wait a minute, can you do that again?" I mean, his head was exploding. He's like, and he was telling me after the fact. He said, "John, you just do this so naturally. I would pay $5,000 for you to just teach me how to do that." I'm like, "Really? Well, I'll need to add that as a module, but I'm not going to charge 5 grand for it."
Right.
But it's important that people know how to do that kind of stuff, because when you do it the right way, your job is infinitely easier, but what you get is infinitely better, and the service that you can provide your customers is infinitely better, and
Yeah,
your
and the
employees are happier too.
yeah, and everything is just more meaningful when it's not like just some generic, to whom it may concern kind of thing,
Yeah,
whatever it is.
right.
John, thank you so much for your time. Everything you need to connect with John and get his help or have him speak at an event or whatever it might be, which I highly recommend. That's how I met John at a printing event a couple of years ago, and I he gave the roadmap for prompting, and I still use it today, although now I've gotten a little better since we've been having some conversations. And please stay tuned because I'm going to try and convince John to do more AI content for all of us. Until next time, print long, prompt long, and prosper.